Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
Star Trek podcast.
We humans learn more often from a failure or a mistake than we do from an easy success. But not you. You learn by rote. To you, all is memorization and recitation.
Well, I don't know about all that. Deductive reasoning is one of Data's strengths.
Yes, and Holmes too. But Holmes understood the human soul, the dark flecks that drive us, that turn the innocent into the evil. That understanding is beyond Data.
Now you're just being unfair, Doctor.
I don't think so, Lieutenant. Your artificial friend doesn't have a prayer of solving a Holmes mystery that he hasn't read.
I have read them all.
You see?
Maybe the computer could create one in Holmes' style, one where you wouldn't know the outcome.
As I said, he wouldn't have a prayer.
I accept your challenge, Doctor.
Good for you, Data.
We shall return to the holodeck, where I shall dare it to defeat me. And you, madam, are invited to be a witness.
I wouldn't miss it.
Come, Watson.
Okay, are you ready to start the podcast?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
Am we?
All right. Welcome to the It's Got Star Trek podcast. We're going to get right into it this evening.
As always.
We're going to try.
It is episode 145 of the It's Got Star Trek podcast.
I still don't know how you figure that out every
We
time.
are creeping up on
He
our
just keeps-
sesquicentennial.
He keeps track of it.
It's going to be our
Because the thing about it, it changes every week. The number is new every week.
That's how numbers. No, it's how numbers go, man.
Sesquicentennial. Sesquicentennial is what
Sasquatchetanian?
Sesquicentennial?
Sasquatchanium?
Succotash.
It's like titanium, but it's Sasquatchanium.
I think sesquicentennial generally is meant to apply only to years, but we can, I think,
You're talking about Sasquatch.
take a little
Sasquatch.
linguistic.
Well, it's got an ennial at the end.
Afford us some linguistic latitude and allow us to.
A Sasquatch anilial?
All right. Well, we did say we'd get right into it.
I don't think we did.
Welcome to the It's Got Star Trek podcast again.
Again.
This
We're not going to
week-
move on when you say things like that.
Yes, we will, because this week we are discussing
Comment on that.
elementary dear data.
No,
elementary,
my dear Data.
elementary, comma, dear data.
No, it's elementary, my dear Data.
Star Trek: The Next Generation, season 2, episode 3, right at the beginning of this.
Oh,
season.
you're right. It's elementary, dear Data.
The episode
Elementary.
starts out with Picard just
Dear data.
saying a bunch of numbers because he gives the star date, which is all ridiculous, and then he gives like some kind of coordinates.
Yeah, you got to give the
Why
coordinates.
why do we have to know the coordinates?
Because they're going to meet the u.s.s. Victory.
We're not in fucking Starfleet. Like I don't.
Oh,
know
you're saying why?
what-
Why does the audience?
Yeah, they were 3629 by 584.
It's like that means like absolutely nothing. Like show me on a map and I'll be like, oh, okay.
And then it wasn't even like some kind of tactical battle coordinate thing. They're just like,
Right,
we're waiting
right.
for the u.s.s. Victory. That's the plot.
I don't recall them ever
which
really
is fine. That's
given
works.
that much
Perfect.
coordinate detail before.
Well, this
No.
is season 2.
Makes sense.
Right,
It's
they're
season
still-
2. It's 1988. It's December 5th, 1988.
And even
Jeez, oh,
though
flip.
they're doing some Sherlock Holmes kinds of thing, they're still have the synth stuff going on.
Well, it's because it wasn't until season 3 that they got the full orchestra.
That was
Right. But-
they were adding sounds as the seasons progressed.
Have you noticed I keep screwing up the title? I thought it was Elementary My Dear Data all this
It is?
time.
Okay, all right. So sometimes if you get the title wrong, it is an innocent and understandable mistake. Like
What
for
are you
example,
talking about? That's the title.
You might
It's
leave
just
off
elementary
a
dear
the
data.
or something. Yes, elementary dear data.
Oh shit!
I thought it was My Dear Data.
I thought it was too.
Did you both really think that? That I honestly
That's 'cause
kind of
that's
blows
what-
my mind.
That's because what he says.
Dr. Pulaski says that, 'cause
And that's what-
she's a
And that's what
difficult
Holmes
sort of
says.
person.
Well,
Yeah,
Holmes
she
says
was
different
being
things at
difficult.
different times. There are 60
Oh, good was she
stories
was
in the Sherlock Holmes canon. 60 stories. There are 56 short stories and 4 novels for a total of
Damn.
60 stories. And Sherlock Holmes addresses Watson in a variety of ways.
Right, he never says that.
I think he probably says something.
Is it
along
like
those
Beam
lines.
Me Up, Scotty, where they don't say it?
I don't think it's exactly like that, but it's kind of like that. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that.
Kind of, sort of.
Kind of, sort of. Okay, so that is what we're going to be discussing on this episode. And to break it down, we've got our little bulleted outline points here.
Oh, shit.
We will provide some very brief overall impressions. Then we will talk about how this episode works to flesh out Data in this second season. The beginning of the second season here. They've gotten over their first season, all the little bits and pieces.
And they're doing a literal flesh thing because they're talking about humanity.
They're putting flesh onto Data.
I mean, they talk about humanity a lot with Data, but they were explicitly just like, see, Data, us humans, we are nostalgic. And hey, we like to do things that are interesting and we like to lose and be scared of it.
So these
are what humans do.
That will be one of the topics of conversation. We will also discuss Geordi and Pulaski individually and together as a little unit, creating the suitable opponent. And related to that is this whole concept of sort of like the accidental artificial intelligence, which I'm very intrigued by. And if we have time, we can discuss a little bit about what the original ending of this episode was going to be and what your thoughts might be on that. They changed it. It'll be up to you to determine whether it was for better or worse, as well as any old odds and ends along the way. So that's the plan. Moving into the first segment, which we've already explained, is the overall impressions. Jesse, what are your overall impressions of this particular episode of Star Trek?
I think it's a neat episode because it's an early one that does a lot with the holodeck. I can't remember if they do a big holodeck episode.
Do they
And that's why they do so much explaining of the holodeck.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, did they really do much in the way of the holodeck before this? Because, there was a lot
Encounter
of...
at Farpoint had that brief bit with Riker and...
Yeah,
they were like sort of wandering.
But it was like
around.
Geordi gave the explanation of like, see, in the holodeck, where it's actually this size, but it does things to trick our brain. You'd think the holodeck could also trick your brain to like experience time more slowly, so they could, instead of having to slot an hour in the holodeck space, you just slot, a few seconds, and then
that would be cool. I would be curious as to the Star Trek canon mechanism that would permit that.
Yeah.
Time slowing device.
Well, I mean, but it's all about, because the holodeck's all about perception. It's like it thinks you think you're running a mile, but really you're not moving more than a few feet.
It's probably got some like nanobots that are acting like a treadmill.
I would think it had nanobots that went directly into your brain and just started pressing buttons.
Well,
so if they can do that, why not do that with your brain's perception of time?
It's quite possible that in the end, it's going to turn out that just sticking a wire in your head is a far more effective and possible way to do what we see them do on the holodeck.
That's what I've been saying. That's what I've been saying all along. Just like the holodeck and the transporter, and they didn't say this in this episode, but also by necessity, the replicators are all part of the same idea. I've said this.
Yeah, I know you've said it, and so has Captain Picard. And...
particularly in that DS9 episode with my Bashir,
our man Bashir,
the
like
Lord
elementary
of Fun.
my Bashir.
Yeah. Anyway, Jesse, that was a tangent. What you were talking about?
There
your
are
impressions.
many episodes of like the original series where they're they're sci-fi people and they're going to a different setting. Like there's the one where it's like the 20s gangsters. They're doing time travel where they go back to the 60s or some other things are happening like that.
Period piece style.
So there's like sort of like a lot of this period piece kind of stuff going on for Star Trek episodes. There's already a precedent for that. This sort of continues that where they're just going totally
bananas.
Sherlock Holmes.
Totally bananas.
It was bananas. Yeah. Well, which was the Fistful of Datas? Was that after this one? Or
yeah, that was after.
So
this one.
here's the thing: is I'm not particularly fond of
that one's kind of lame.
That's not a great
Datas,
episode, yeah.
But what I really like, this episode has a ridiculous premise. It's really silly, and there's a lot of logistical holes in it. But it doesn't matter because it shows that a good story doesn't need to be bogged down in logic. You know,
totally.
in a certain kind of way. And so And it's funny because it's all about logic and Sherlock Holmes and deduction and stuff. But, the premise is just like, they arbitrarily give some coordinates and like, we're waiting for the u.s.s victory. We don't know why, but it doesn't matter. And it's true. It's like, who cares? It doesn't fucking matter. And then they this whole like holodeck madness that goes on and sort of this
holodeck madness.
And this sort of blending of serious life or death shit and comedic sort of campiness that like the characters are sort of
It's
like
classic Star Trek.
Yeah, it's a tone that works very well in the Star Trek milieu.
And even the tone switches between like this sort of campy sort of Sherlock Holmes interpretation, right? But the characters are switching back and forth. Like suddenly Data is talking like normal Data, but then he slowly fades back into Sherlock Holmes. And there's other instances of that. And there's these very serious life or death scenarios, but somehow you're still having like this fun, even though it's like everyone in it's still having fun. Everyone's like, Picard's all having fun, but like some serious, like he's got to fucking shake the Enterprise lever on it, and he's like shaking the Enterprise around with this lever, and
you
like,
totally buy it. I think that for me, I think what part of what makes it work is on the one hand, just written down, you'd be like, all right, so the holographic Moriarty wiggles a handle and then the whole ship shakes.
Right.
It sounds ludicrous. Yeah. But somehow
it's like, why does that handle need to, it's like
they pull it off somehow.
Yeah, they pull it off, and it's like this handle goes forward or backwards, and all it seems to do is shake it more or not at all. And and somehow it works because it just gets across what you need to know, and you don't have to worry if it makes a lot of sense. And I don't know what to attribute that to. It's just maybe because the episode's so fun. But if
maybe we can get into that in this conversation that we're having on the podcast.
Well, the
audience can go along on the journey with us.
I think that it's difficult. I would imagine that it's a thin line they're walking, where if they didn't execute it right, the whole thing could have fallen apart.
I agree. And for my own personal overall impressions,
like your Oshkosh Bagoshes.
This is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite episodes.
I wear my galoshes with my Oshkosh Bagoshes.
That sounds awful.
I understand if people don't place this at the top of their best episodes list, but it is certainly one of the episodes I'm most fond of. I just find it so easy to watch. It's charming.
It's entertaining.
There's a lot of clever stuff going on in here.
There's ideas they present that like
the scenery is cool.
The scenery's great. The acting's good. One thing I was wondering is, I think part of it
is cool.
Well, because Jesse, as you noted, Star Trek has a long tradition of doing these sort of period piece type things using various mechanisms. But I think part of what makes this such a fun episode is the location of turn of the century or late 19th century London. There's just a lot of stuff to play around there, the flavor of that time period, and getting a chance to see our characters stomping around in that time period.
It was really steamy. Did you notice there was a lot of steam going around there? But even in Moriarty's like electro office, a lab.
He probably had a steamy lab. Yeah.
He had a steam, but the streets were steamy. But then it got extra steamy because did you notice at one part that the ceiling turned into? It was like the whole holodeck program was falling apart.
Yes.
You could see the holodeck
you could
ceiling,
see all the smoky fog
at one point. So I thought that was cool.
I think the Enterprise had a lot of vapors on it. There's a bunch of episodes where things get all vapory.
Yeah. Engineering often has vapors coming out.
Well, you're talking about the set. I was trying to look at some of those signs, and I kind of half forgot, half couldn't tell out most of them.
One was like Tovey Muse.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out what it was saying. Was it Tovey? I couldn't know if it was Tolly or something.
It was Tovey Muse.
Right, I looked that up, and I tried to Google that to see if it was an actual address in London, and it sent me to something about Sherlock Holmes. It's a fictional address.
Oh, so it's in Sherlock Holmes. It didn't direct you to like Star Trek Sherlock Holmes.
Well, and the Sherlock Holmes stories.
So there was like I wonder if there were references to the stories because there was the grill room.
Oh yeah, that's all
noted ale and stout stores. Interestingly, they have a nut brown ale. And
everybody's got a nut brown ale.
Why is this interesting?
I don't know if I should mention this because it's kind of childish and stupid.
Is this a poop joke?
No, but this was like many, many, many years ago. I was like, I want an entry on Urban Dictionary. So I remember at the place I worked at the time sold this beer. It was someone's, I don't know if it was
Handy Jack's Nut Brown Ale.
I don't know if it was Leinenkugel. It might have been I might have been Leinenkugel Nut Brown Ale.
Is this going to be an appropriate story for the podcast?
No, but I won't.
I'm just kidding.
But yeah. So yeah, I guess what are the limits? But it was some kind of nut brown ale. I thought that's funny, and then so I made an entry on Urban Dictionary to say what a nut brown ale is, and it got on there. It's really stupid. It's just dumb. It's so stupid. But
is it still on there?
It should be. Yeah. It's still on there. Nut brown ale. So if you're, I shouldn't have brought it up.
Everyone out there, go look it up on the Urban Dictionary. If it's still there, you can attribute whatever the definition is.
It's so childish. It was so long ago. I wrote this so long ago.
Is it a noun or is it a verb?
Or is it or is it an adverb?
It's a. What's the deal with those adverbs
Nut
again?
brown alingly.
Oh yeah, right. It's a verb. Yeah, well, no, it's a noun. It's a noun for an action.
It's what? It's a what? You can't make up language like that.
I did earlier request a certain amount of linguistic latitude from our audience, but I don't know if we can have that much.
They're not going to buy
latitude.
it. Dude.
It's
the other things going on. Jack the Ripper was 1888. The Sherlock Holmes stories were written between 1892 and 1927, so that's sort of the time period that a good amount of the Holmes stories happened in, although mostly late 19th century. But having Jack the Ripper in like the background, I think adds into that. And again, that's just sort of a cultural memory thing. You see this environment of this slummy, kind of creepy looking, foggy ass London in the dark with all these criminals and stuff.
So many criminals.
It makes you think.
There's so many criminals.
Makes you think of all that. That's like instant
that guy
flavor.
tried to mug 2 people with a knife.
Yeah, was that the guy after Picard was like a tuppence, 2 pence?
Yeah.
That guy.
2 pence.
Or did he use some kind of Aikido on that dude and like did a wrist twist on that guy?
Well, he just squeezed his thumb.
Break your hand off.
He's just squeezing his thumb the whole time.
And that was a comedic moment. That was a strange comedic moment. It's like Pulaski might die and that ship is being taken control, but we have time to. Picard has time to like flip a coin and be all like. He did that move with I think it was Stetson hats did this, but probably others did too, where you hit it with the cane
and it terrified Worf. Did you see that Worf nearly jumped out his fucking uniform?
He was acting all like smoothly, and then in the Picard show when they do that dress up costume gag, he acts like some kind of jackass.
Well, that's because he was playing a French person. and the French character of French Picard is clearly more comfortable in the role of an English gentleman in the late 19th century as opposed to a French gentleman.
Strangely enough.
All right, so let's get into the meat of the story. Let's
get into the boogies and the woogies.
We'll get into some of the details of like the plot, but of course the plot's pretty straightforward. Holodeck, goes crazy because Geordi asks for a suitable opponent to Data. We'll go into that more in a little bit, but I like that premise, right? It's like, okay. But this really was a fucking showcase for Brent Spiner. And I think, like, if you're watching TNG from the beginning, there's a lot of great stuff in season 1. But I think this is where they sort of finally figure out Data. And part of the way they help him figure it out is by giving him this opportunity to play this, as you said, Dan, campy version of Sherlock Holmes. And you alluded to this as well, Dan, how at the beginning he's switching back and forth immediately from like the Data and the Sherlock Holmes, character. But as the story goes along, there's less and less distinction between the two.
Right. Yeah, it was funny because when Data Geordi summoned him to look at that model he made, and then Data was all like concerned. He was like almost berating Geordi. He's like, "But Geordi, you said there was an emergency." All like serious. Right. And Geordi's like, "Oh yeah, Data, let's go be awesome in Sherlock Holmes." And then immediately Data's like,
Geordi's a Ninja Turtle.
Oh yeah, Data. Yeah, dude. Data. Right time. Hey, pizza time, Data. Data. Cowabunga.
He's a creepy Ninja Turtle.
California roll. That was from the movie. But then immediately Data's like goes from being like, I thought he's like, Geordi, I thought it was something really serious, to like, forsooth, or whatever.
The game is afoot.
Does Sherlock Holmes say forsooth?
He never says forsooth.
Forsooth.
He does say the game is afoot.
He does say that.
You should start saying forsooth.
Yeah.
Forsooth.
I would support that.
But he flipped. But yeah, like you said, like, yeah, there was several, I think there was like 3 or 4 parts where near the beginning, like LaForge says, Data, Holmes really talk like that after Data was like talking some kind of fancy talk. And like Data was all like fancy. And then LaForge was like, Holmes really talk like that? And Data's like, absolutely. And then there was another part because you know all this because you read in a Holmes story. And Data's like, not at all. It's like another breaking character. And then there's something about like why there was another murder going on. He's like, I do not know. That's what puzzles me. But like there were several parts where he would start in like the Data voice, and over time he would slowly, and these were in serious sort of
it's
like
as he became more confident in his, like as he was coming up with conclusions, he was turning more into Holmes.
That's what it was happening. He'd come up with this serious conclusion, like he had this revelation, and then he'd switch over to Data beta mode, but then he'd slowly get all into it and pumped and psyched about it, and then you know, there was a couple good moments where he like I guess the first moment I think that he turned into Super Solver was that bit about the left shoe, and he spun around on his shoe and he was wearing
like, the
rubber.
game is afoot.
Was that what you say?
Well, that's when he was like, the game is truly afoot.
Well, right when Pulaski gave that was one of the first parts where they mixed the tones up a bit. Or you got the serious moment, and Pulaski off screen is just like like some damsel in distress or something. And we don't know at this point if she knows what's going on or if she's like does she know she's in danger? But they don't know.
She's just getting crumpets shoved down her gullet.
Yeah, right. I know, stuff full of crumpets. But
she was getting stuffed full of crumpets.
But like Data and Geordi all like hear that and they're like, oh no. And what's happening is she's getting captured, and Moriarty's gonna do some fucked up shit if he doesn't get his way. But that's what we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Is he one of those bad guys?
And so Data and Geordi give this awesome look to each other. I think that was when they said the game that might not have been game is afoot, but they gave this awesome look at each other, and then they were like off, you know, and it was they're
having fun.
It was all having fun and like that campiness, and but there was some serious shit going on. So
now I really like that this is the 3rd episode of the 2nd season, and they're giving Brent Spiner more opportunities to expand this character, and in doing so they're defining him more. And one thing that was really important in this episode is the plot of the episode relies on the facts we've learned about Data over the course of the first season and the previous couple, the episodes that have come prior. It's like one of those great plots where you couldn't just plop this into any character. It only works with Data. Could you do some variation on it? Sure, maybe. But like, this is a Data plot, and it relies on the character of Data that's been created by the writers and Brent Spiner up to this point. And I think that's another thing that makes it really easy to invest in this episode and invest in the, suspend your disbelief for any things that, because there's a fair amount that you might need to suspend your disbelief for on this particular episode. But it works because of that, because it's really like tied to the character.
And this is early Data where they're still sort of working out the emotionless thing. It's almost like early Spock in a way on TOS where,
like the cage Spock where he's laughing at those purple flowers,
singing
flowers.
Right, where he gives like moments of excitement, right? And so that's how Data gets at the thought of like doing the Sherlock Holmes. He gets all giddy. Data almost gets like giddy thinking about the Sherlock Holmes stuff. And the getting into character, I know he's just like playing a game, but I guess you could say that that's a I mean, that's more understandable. He's trying to be human, but like you can tell he's giddy and excited when they talk about playing Sherlock Holmes, and that was still back when they're forming this emotionless Data. They're still allowing some leeway, and this, like I said, it's fine. It was similar to what Spock was doing.
Is this the first time that they have Data playing violin?
It may be. I can't recall if there was anything in the first season.
In that scene, did you notice he turned around
so you couldn't see his fingering?
Yeah, right. And I'm wondering if they did it so that if they cut away and cut back, if it might have been someone else playing, but it was so.
You don't want to see bad fingering on a
right. It's just
TV
unusual
show.
for a back to be facing like a stage because it's like a stage dealy, right? They talk about movies are like a stage, and I imagine this kind is more stage-like than others. Yeah. So usually you don't turn your back to the thing.
You can do it on TV though.
But yeah, it's probably to cover his format, which is. So
partly that, and also it is a semi cinematic to see him standing in front of the fireplace. But
he's a dramatic dude. Sherlock
I agree.
Holmes.
I think
he's always
was
swishing around, and he's facing this way, he's facing that way, he's playing the violin.
So this may be the first time Data played the violin.
He's telling you what.
I do think they were hiding his fingers in that scene so he wouldn't look ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean it's easy to like hold a violin and have it like hold what you think it's like and basically be right, but tell that it's like, no, that's not. You're doing a lot of things wrong here. Even how you hold the bow.
The holding the bow, I was going to say,
Yeah,
because you gotta get your fingers have to be all like gnarled and crazy.
There's
'cause
people
you
that
can't
the people
hold
that
all
know
crazy.
they'll always can tell if you don't know what you're doing. It's like, yeah, you're not holding the bow.
They
Yeah,
can
with the
always
piano, it's
tell.
easy. You just get the angle on the other side of the
Yeah.
piano, and then with a clarinet or sax, they just kind of randomly press buttons, and you know they're playing the wrong thing. But it's like, oh, it kind of passes, I guess. But
It
you hold
doesn't
a
really
not
matter.
doesn't. But the holding
You can
the
tell by
violin-
their mouth that it's not really happening.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
All right, how about the next thing is...
No, you're right. They take breaths at funny places. I thought you were talking about the piano.
Were you talking about the violinists?
He was
or
talking about
violists?
I thought when he's talking about
People
the breaths.
like faking the saxophone.
I thought he was talking about faking the piano with his mouth, and I was
No,
like,
well,
I
you
never-
don't play a piano with your
I
mouth.
know. That's why I was like, I never thought of it that
I mean,
way.
I don't.
Something you could try sometime. All right, Geordi and Pulaski. We've mentioned them both, but in the structure of the story, the way everything's set up is that they're basically they almost have a bet between each other, right?
Right.
And Geordi is all like thinks that Data's rad and awesome and magical.
Because he is.
Because he is. Geordi's right in this case, right? Pulaski, of course, was introduced as this McCoy-like irascible character, and all throughout
Yeah.
season 2, she's aggravating Data.
So McCoy's all charming.
McCoy is a little bit more charming. Now, I'm a fan of Pulaski. I'm not a Pulaski hater. I do prefer our good Dr. Beverly Crusher, and I'm glad that she came back to the show. But season 2 does offer us this little, like, shakes things up a little bit by introducing this new character who, as of this episode, is still very fresh, right? She's a very fresh character.
This is just a few episodes in, I believe.
Yeah, it's three episodes
Three.
in.
But of course, she turns around and is immediately just like, we get this straight up idea of like, this is Pulaski and Data.
Yeah.
It's almost insulting. And
Well, I was going to say this whole concept, even Geordi's
Sitting there
participation,
drinking
even
some
though
coffee.
Geordi is supporting Data, the fact that Geordi and Pulaski are just talking about Data right next to him, I find mildly offensive.
yeah, it feels like they're having some kind of bet/science experiment that's going. There's like a science experiment where they're both trying to prove the different sides,
And Data's just like, huh.
Yeah, and they're sort of like
Nice.
letting Data like run free and sort of frolic about while they sort of like be like, "See, no, I told you," you know. And
But yeah, Pulaski is straight up like, nah, he's just a database.
So
Yeah.
they're both,
knows
they're
a
both
lot.
terrible.
Well, she
Is that what
gave-
you're saying?
Well, I mean, I like Geordi's totally correct, and I think it's awesome that Geordi is both correct about Data and that he's supporting his friend Data. This is another. It's hard to disentangle this in the timeline because we know of Geordi and Data being such good friends, but at this stage, this is one of their friendship building episodes, right? This is an early episode where we're like, okay, these guys are like super best buddies, and they're going on dates on the holodeck and shit. They're like having a great time together. I do think that's awesome. However, it's just a little awkward. It would be like if Jesse and I were sitting here being like, and I'm all like, well, I think Dan can totally do this thing, and Jesse's like,
and you're like,
no, he's stupid.
Dan could never
And
do that.
It's like you glued a cookie to the ceiling and be like, I bet Dan could not get up there, and the others is like, he could get up there and he would eat a glue cookie, and I'm just like jumping up and down, going, oh, I can't get it, you guys.
But meanwhile, like,
you guys,
Dan,
come on.
Dan has no agency in this conversation. He's just got to sit there and listen, and then perform actions in order to determine which one of us, Jesse or I, is correct.
Right. Well, they gave good arguments on both sides, because Pulaski's argument against the idea of androids having a sort of this idea of a consciousness. Now, there's a whole philosophical idea behind that, and is there something inherently different about the human, though some people might refer to as a soul or was consciousness? Can you have consciousness without
Imbuing a soul, shoving a soul in there.
Can you have can a
Lord of
robot?
the Rings talk. Was it the Fea? The Fea?
Can robots?
The Rora?
Can robots have enough of a consciousness to be motivated by anything other than a reaction to what's happening? You know, or like, you know, in order, do robots desire to do things, or are they only a reaction to stimulus around us? And then the question, of course, is, are humans, do we think we do that, but we're just a reaction?
That's right.
So she goes, they're talking about value in losing, and she's like, that's the great teacher, losing. She goes, we humans, I love the whole like, we humans do this. Earlier, Jordan's like, humans.
We're all humans here.
It's humans' nature to love what we don't have, nostalgia. And Pulaski's like, we humans. And they did a lot of that. Well, they only did that twice, but that's the
because
whole.
They're racist against all the other aliens that are members of the Federation.
Right. That's true. They should have said we people.
Yeah.
But she goes, we humans learn more often from a failure or mistake than we do from an easy success. She's like, you learn from rote and
Yeah, you learn by rote, so just data and repetition.
And she basically goes, and when she says Data doesn't have any experience having a soul, and he can't intuit because he can't go beyond his programming. Basically,
well, he doesn't even need the repetition. He just programs. I mean, I'm not defending what she's saying, but he downloads information. He just downloads the information. He doesn't have to like practice memorizing.
Well, what they're basically doing in this episode is this is a more lighthearted version of the debate that's going to happen in episode 9 of the second season, The Measure of a Man, in which Data's actual like
with that Bruce guy.
Yeah, whether or not he's a sapient creature. Now, of course, in Star Trek, like in a lot of other places, they often misuse the term sentience.
Right.
They refer to being sentient or not when dogs are sentient. Anything that has a apprehension of feeling and all that stuff is sentient. But if you're sapient, that means can you have a theory of mind? Can you gain wisdom? That's really what people mean in this case. Is Data a sapient person? And that's the measure of a man. That's the debate there. But the same debate is happening here. It's just on like a more lighthearted and lower level scale because nobody's talking about ripping Data to pieces or anything like that, or enslaving him. It's
not
really,
in this episode.
It's really just more of an argument over what is his capacity, what is his intellectual capacity is. That's what Dr. Pulaski keeps getting at.
She goes, Holmes understood the human soul, the dark flecks that drive us, that turn the innocent into the evil. That understanding is beyond Data. It comes from life experience, which he doesn't have, combined with human intuition for which he cannot be programmed. It's those last two parts. It's like he doesn't have an experience understanding the soul because he doesn't have one, or basically is what she's saying. That sort of like esoteric kind of idea, but it's based upon motivation and human intuition. You can't program that into people, and Vulcans.
And she was already bashing Data for the first 2 episodes, this whole time.
She's been against him from the start. Probably is to this day. But Vulcans, didn't they have a thing about intuition was stupid or something too? Didn't they say something?
Some of them.
Vulcans are always saying shit.
But they're always talking about intuition.
Yeah.
Intuition. What is this? It's not logical. And they're talking about like all the people like Data.
The character of Pulaski often gets flack. And part of the reason why I think she gets flack, part of it is just because she replaced a beloved character.
Because she needs a grain protein. That's why she gets flack.
Oh, shit.
Flaxseed.
Okay.
Flaxseed joints inflammation.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what flaxseed does. Is it prevents inflammation.
All right. So, but the character, I think the other reason she gets a lot of flack from the fandom is because the function of the character is to come on the ship and start aggravating people, and not for fun.
What's she doing on the ship?
She's aggravating people.
No, what did she do? She arrived on the ship. You said something. I used a different word.
Okay. When she got posted to the Enterprise as the chief medical officer, I'm not going to let you bait me.
Don't bully me.
I'm not going to let you bait me.
But I'm a master at it.
It's kind of like when they get the replacement captain guy. But it's just, for 2 episodes.
The reason you need so Roddenberry had this whole hard on against like not having any interpersonal conflict on the show, right? He wanted all the conflict to be generated externally.
And we discussed this before, but was that a TNG, new to TNG, or was
it was a new to TNG because he was aggravated that in TOS, in his opinion, because of the studio and other stuff, it turned more cowboyish than maybe he would have preferred. Roddenberry said and did a bunch of weird things in the 80s, right? And he now had the power to enforce some of his initial ideas, right? And so that's one issue. And I think that this is the first crack in that because she's causing interpersonal issues, but it's not drama from like love and murder and all this stuff.
She's just being an instigator.
She's exactly, but an instigator in a useful character way, in the sense that she's asking the questions that need to be asked.
Exactly, precisely.
But instead of having the alien guest star of the week ask that question, now you have somebody who's on board and can always be available to be in the position to say, okay, well, I'm going to ask this very obvious question, or I'm going to stake out this position that needs to be staked out in order to have the discussion that we're trying to have in this episode.
Right. I think
Data shady.
It lays out very succinctly the argument, succinctly, whatever, specific. It lays out very succinctly.
you had it right the first time.
I can't say it. Succinctly. My name is Susan Inkley. They lays out very succinctly.
It's nice to meet you, Susan.
That's
They lay out very clear.
Or should I say Miss Inkley?
They're very clear and to the point about laying out the arguments against an android having a life, having a consciousness. It's making the point of like, these are the challenges an android has to face with having consciousness or sentience, or what's the difference again?
Or at an even baser level, creativity. She's saying he can't really be creative.
Right,
he can only use what
and that kind of like lays down a framework near the beginning that you can kind of build on, because it doesn't go super explanation about it. She just lays out a few points that are like the challenges faced in trying to comprehend a life form from like robot butts.
Okay, talking about robot butts, why don't we hold on that, and then we'll take a quick break.
Hold on to your robot butts.
Take a quick break.
And when we get back,
what's that from? Hold on to your robot butts.
It's something you just said.
Yeah.
Hold on to your butts. Hold on to your butts. What's that from?
Is it from Alf?
This
from
is
Jurassic Park. It's
Unix.
Samuel L. Jackson in Jurassic Park. Goddamn.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to the break. We're going to take a break.
I knew he was going to be cast in Sphere before Sphere. When I was reading that book, I was like, I bet they make a movie and cast Samuel L. Jackson, and they did. It wasn't a good movie.
This movie was made for Samuel L.
Good for you, Ms. Inkley. When we get back, Susan, Jesse, and I will talk about why it makes sense for Jesse to play for Geordi to play the Watson role. I don't think it makes sense for Jesse to play the Watson role.
No.
I think Jesse should be Lestrade.
Lestrade of all people.
Okay, we'll come back and talk about Geordi. All right, be right back. Okay, all right, we're back.
That sounds really explicit.
Returned.
That's gratuitous. That's just fucking gratuitous.
Jesse is just amusing us with his mouth sounds. We're having a good old time over here.
That was my mouth.
This is classic
mouth sounds. All right, so in the construct of this episode, we've got Data as Sherlock Holmes, which makes sense for all the obvious reasons, right? And then his best buddy could have been anybody.
Could have been anybody. It could have been anybody, but it was best buddy. Could have been anybody, but it was best buddy. Could have been anybody, but it was best buddy, buddy.
It's Geordi, and
make it a bloody buddy.
The important thing to recall about the character of Watson is that Dr. Watson is a very talented, very intelligent person. He's a sophisticated person. Yet in the Sherlock Holmes stories, he's always that almost right, but always wrong in the end. Like he's always trying to come up with his solutions to things, and it's always wrong, right? It's not that he's a dumb guy, but he's never gets it quite right. And I think that putting Geordi in this role works so well because Geordi he's a fucking genius, right? When it comes to technical stuff, when it comes to fixing the warp engines or putting together a model ship or whatever, Geordi can do that. He's a really good problem solver. We've seen him solve mysteries before, although they tend to be mysteries of a technical nature, right? Like in the next phase, for example, like the mysteries around Geordi often have a technical aspect to them.
There was that exchange where Pulaski was talking about, the joys of fearing losing and stuff. She was like, I'm a doctor and I solve mysteries and I don't always know everything. And Geordi is just like to Data, but Data, you don't have this problem because you know everything. And Data's just kind of like, yeah, I guess you're right, I do. But so Data I mean, they're both good engineers. I'm wondering how even Data doesn't know everything. That was a weird line. I'm not really sure what they were going.
It makes sense in the context of this episode, because my point is that what Geordi is good at, he's good at all that technical stuff. What he's not good at is understanding sort of like regular old human social dynamics. That's what he doesn't get. He misses out on things because he doesn't understand that.
I agree with what you're saying, but that was not in response to what I just said.
It is, because what I'm trying to say
That's why he gets along with Data.
But the reason it works is Data, he can solve this as Sherlock Holmes or as Data, because Data has a much better understanding of human interactions. In I'm asserting this, I'm arguing this, that he has a better understanding of human interaction because he's so obsessed with studying humans. And specifically, he's obsessed with studying humans through various forms of art output that humans make.
Right.
He likes plays, he likes paintings, he likes music, he likes stories like the Sherlock Holmes
Robots
stories,
aren't
right?
supposed to like things. It's
Well,
like
he clearly does, right?
Because a lot of these other people aren't that familiar with the Sherlock Holmes stuff. Like
yes.
Geordi isn't. Pulaski doesn't know about lumps. Like
So Geordi lives in a future
Crumpets,
world where
lumps. She doesn't know what lumps are.
they don't have to deal.
she doesn't read a book.
They don't have to deal with these types of interactions with people, right? He doesn't understand the concept of like, the wife who was beaten by the husband who got out of prison and stuff.
Yeah,
that's completely alien to him.
We're casually watching a victim of domestic violence get put in jail
for murdering her abusive husband.
And it seems all and it seems
that was fucked
and it was
up.
weird because we're supposed to be all like, that was clever and wonderful how well he solved that, because which was, by the way, after Geordi all tried to solve the problem. It was
that's what I'm saying.
confident.
Geordi could not conceive.
And
He was
Data was
looking at the actual physical things because he's like, he was strangled. It must have been a strong guy.
And Data wasn't very tactful about it. He was just like, no way, Geordi, you're all wrong.
And well, also the thing with Data/Holmes is in the Sherlock Holmes stories. Sherlock Holmes is famously dismissive of any. He couldn't care less about solving crimes. He likes solving complicated puzzles, and there are multiple instances in the Sherlock Holmes stories where he quite literally walks by a crime in progress and doesn't do anything to stop it because he couldn't care less that somebody's getting mugged or somebody's getting beaten up or murdered or something, because it's not a mystery. He wants to solve the mystery, right? And so that's a hint of that here with Data.
Screw loose.
Because Data's all like, this has nothing to do with our mystery. He couldn't care less about this whole situation, and he only reluctantly solves the mystery because he's being pressured to.
Mm-hmm.
Peer pressured.
That part didn't age well.
Yeah, well, it is funny that they didn't say like, she should go free then.
Yeah,
like,
right.
Oh yeah, well he's dead and she should go to
Like,
jail.
no, you're coming with us.
I think that with that domestic violence victim and the one where he was talking about footballs. I kept saying footballs. He kept talking about footballs.
Footfalls.
He kept talking about footballs all everywhere, which I thought was weird. I don't know what footballs had to do with that whole thing,
because he wasn't talking about.
But he was talking about
footfalls.
He was talking about footballs spinning on the ground and stuff. It was like, yeah, you can spin a football on the ground, but
so a programming note to the audience. Jesse and I honestly cannot tell if Dan's fucking with us or not. The expression of his face is illegible. We don't know if he's joking here or if he actually has misconstrued footfalls for footballs. I suspect that he does know that it was footfalls. I strongly suspect.
It sounded like they were saying footballs, though. That's all I'm going to say. It did sound like that, didn't they? Am I wrong in thinking that it sounded like that?
Yes.
Well,
you are wrong.
I wasn't wrong that it sounded like that. That's what I heard. Are you telling me what I heard?
There is a subjective,
Are you telling me what I heard?
There's a subjective aspect to hearing things.
Well, I never
will grant you that.
I didn't specify.
I do not know what sort of sound system you were watching this television program on.
I didn't. Maybe it's not my sound system. Maybe it's just my ears and the interpreting. You can't tell me what I heard.
I'm not telling you what you heard. You asked if you were wrong or not.
No, I didn't ask if I was wrong about what it was. I said, am I wrong that it sounded like that? Because football sounds like footballs.
All right. So just to close out that segment, the main point I was trying to make is that it was somewhat funny that the robot has a more fundamental understanding of humanity than the human that fixes the robots.
Yeah, right.
Right. It's like it's not quite, but there's a hint of 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? In 2001: A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick made the humans act in as robotic a fashion as possible to accentuate the human elements, the emotional elements elements of the HAL computer. And I don't know if it was done purposefully here, but I think there's a bit of that here as well.
Well, yeah, when somebody makes a robot or there's a computer program or something and it acts in ways that are unexpected, that's delightful. It tickles you, and that's what was happening with Geordi. Kind of similar to how the Pulaski and Geordi.
Was that happening with you?
The website's down. It's delightful.
It's yeah, right.
I'm so tickled.
I didn't mean like as in that. I meant like let's program a pool of water.
I'm tingling all over.
We'll program a pool of water here and a cow here, and we'll say cows like water. But I didn't expect that it would actually seek out that pool that I made over. Anyways, if that made any sense at all, I realized.
The scenario you just described sounds like it's exactly what you'd want to happen.
But it's what you'd want to happen. But maybe you weren't expecting that
the cow to become a fish.
That you wouldn't expect the cow to see that lake as a body of water because the cow's used to getting water from a pail.
Jesse, what's this guy talking about?
I think what you're saying is you expected to do more to get those two things together, but that it worked out so you didn't have to do as much as you thought.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, you know what? That's pretty much on point for what I was saying. It was basically just like
Which is like when you're delighted. That's a weirdly appropriate segue to talk about the whole like AI business.
Right. So I was gonna say
emergent AI,
and this is part of the segue. I guess I was talking about those two moments. The one where he was talking about football spinning on the ground, and the part where he was he found the victims of the domestic violence. Those two moments were Data Discovery 1 and 2 respectively, and both times Geordi was like, now we're talking, and like
when you heard footballs, did you imagine, I want the sincere answer, did you imagine an American football or an association football, a soccer ball?
No, I was thinking an American football where they take it and spin it on its point, and it, how when they get a touchdown they spin it on its point,
like an oblong funny ball.
So you think this was happening in 19th century, late 19th century?
I didn't write it. I just heard it. But anyways,
yes. Yeah.
But yeah, Geordi was all tickled by Data. These were the moments when Data first started solving the puzzles. Because before
it sounded like he said puddles.
Because before
I imagined a regular old American puddle.
Because before it was just a straight the first one was just straight up a Holmes book. The second one, they patched some Holmes together, which is, by the way,
just stuck a couple Holmes stories together.
Which is actually kind of the way a lot of what we consider AI today. That's basically what's going on. Is what happened in the second scenario, where AI today is a lot of it is just like patching together shit in such a way, like deep fakes are basically that, like in so many, I mean, they use formulas and statistics and things like that, but that's essentially how AI kind of like works in a much more simpler way. You
but what do you think about this whole concept of an AI being created sort of accidentally by a non-AI computer system just trying to fulfill a directive? What do you think of that concept? Because this all hinges on the idea that Geordi, in an effort to help his friend defend himself against the mean doctor lady who was calling him stupid. like he said, he asked the computer, he said, make an enemy, make an opponent that is capable of beating Data.
Right. And later on, he actually
in the Holmesian style, because otherwise it would have just made a giant Klingon monster creature that would just tear Data limb from limb.
What do they call Yargs or something? I don't know.
Targs are
the doggish one. Aren't there like Toby big Tar. Yeti? Are there Yeti Klingon monsters?
I'm sure there are.
Sure, there's got to be up in that where their temple is. When they're templed, in order to get to the temple, you probably have to fight a bunch of Klingon Yetis or something, or Sasquai. But what were we talking about? We were talking about shit.
Klingon Sasquai.
We were talking about something, and I was
talking about the AI emerging. Like, do you think it's one reason?
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I was gonna say, first of all, Geordi, and this goes into what you're saying tangentially, but it relates. Geordi was really apologetic about having created this, as if it was his fault somewhere. And like
Picard was all annoyed.
Yeah, he was
like, all right, tell me what happened.
He's like, and Picard's like, no,
why'd you guys do this?
He goes, no, I understand you did that, whatever. Right. And it's like, you shouldn't be able to accidentally like say the wrong thing and have the holodeck take over the ship and endanger somebody's life.
Right.
You would have thought
it's a little bit magical.
Yeah, you would have thought that somebody. I mean, who has access to the holodeck? Do the kids have access to the holodeck with adult supervision?
Hope not, no.
But I'm saying, like, do civilians have access to the holodeck? Because they could say something.
I think you gotta get a certain amount of points or something. Some chits.
Yeah.
Do you think
Blips and chits.
How are you going to like tell the holodeck to make something that's going to disable the mortality failsafe on you?
Well,
you know?
because he did give the override command, and he is the chief of engineering. So that's plausible. I mean, within
did he have to give an override code in order to program?
He did. It was like one of the first things he did. He was like,
fair enough.
Yeah.
Which just seems okay. So that's I don't remember that part, but that's shady if you did that. So I don't know, but I still don't know if it was really. It wasn't really. I don't remember him giving the failsafe code, but I don't see how this was.
Because unlike giving the coordinates at the beginning, they didn't make a big deal about it. It was just in his he was talking with the computer and going through the process. I did really like the fact though that when Pulaski was all like, she was like, "Oh, is the computer trying to limit the whatever?" And he's like, "No, the parameters define how the program will accomplish the directive, right?" And that's true. That's exactly how real world works, right? You need the parameters. You need the borders. You need to test the limits.
You gotta give them arguments so they can accept the arguments as parameters.
Parameters.
But the way they came to that idea of this holodeck program, you'd think they would have went this from the start. They were like, I know what I'll do. Here, computer, make a program that can beat this guy. And that was like the big clever move, right?
Yeah.
To make this.
But you had to go through the two other things first.
You had to go through the
it's
two other.
It's got to be the third thing.
Right, exactly. And so in terms of a plot, it works just fine. But when you think realistically, it's like, all you did to come up with this brilliant holodeck program was say, hey, beat this guy.
I would argue that you're only saying that because you've seen this episode since you were a child.
No, I No, I don't think so.
You.
Because if you want to make a challenge for Data, you say, make something that'll beat Data. It's just like if I was going to make a challenge for Jesse, I was saying, like, computer, make something that's going to beat Jesse. It's not exactly a complicated command.
But that wouldn't be that difficult. Like,
yeah.
That's what they did, though.
Beating Data would be something like difficult.
Yeah, it would, but they didn't have to say, like, I want to do this and that and go gooby ga and go jeebity 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 joo ja joo. It just says, computer beat Data. Do that. Just do that. And it took them like 25 minutes into the episode or 20 minutes into the episode to come up with computer beat Data. That's the secret. Beat Data. I think
that would be the logical series of progression because
I think that you do that from the start. That's the very first thing you would do.
Well, it depends on where you're talking about the start because the first Holmes mystery that Geordi hilariously and rudely walks out on.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
So angry.
Is Geordi real? This is like a Captain Archer, like overly angry at nothing moment where he's like, "Are you really mad at Data?" And another part where Data's almost seems emotional. Data's like Geordi's walking out, and Data's like, "But
Geordi."
But he's like, "But Geordi." Yeah, and he seems all hurt, and it's like, "Oh, Data."
But first of all,
you don't want to see a sad Data. That sucks.
You can't skip that one. That has to happen for anyone to even realize there's an issue.
I think it has to happen because it makes the plot better. And I think it's a good, and I'm glad it does.
The first thing has to happen because no one even begins to have the question, right? They don't have the question about
question
until they go through that first one. You could argue the second one, maybe they could have gone right into it and been like, Geordi could have been like, all right.
I will.
But you got to have that first one.
Okay, the first one.
Otherwise, the question doesn't exist in the first
It's the question, Neo. Yeah. No, okay, I will go along with that. I think it could have been, they could have skipped a second one. I don't want them to because I enjoyed it and it was fun.
But to me, the logical progression made sense, which is Geordi gets mad at the first one in a hilarious, aggressive fashion. In the second one, they're like, okay, we think the problem is that Data has all the stories in his head, so obviously he knows the end, so what's the point? So they think they've solved that problem by creating a quote-unquote news story. I think you could argue that the computer picked a lazy way to present a news story because it was just combining elements from multiple
but that's what I'm saying, that modern AI basically does that on a really complicated level. But the computer, took a really, really lazy... Yeah, the computer was lazy. Data solves it by, it was like, was the old doorbell falling on the head trick or something?
The snake hidden in the doorbell.
It was a snake hidden.
When you pull on the door thing, the snake falls out and bites you.
And kills you?
Yeah,
it doesn't just make you scare
It didn't bite
you?
them and kill them.
Right.
It would have apparently bitten and killed the other guy.
And in that moment when he solved it, they run off.
Dumb.
and she's all like, fraud,
Yeah.
fraud. It was
Yeah,
all
she said
like,
fraud. That
Like,
was
you're a
rough.
piece of shit.
yeah, Geordi and they get all excited and Geordi takes her by the arm and holds out his arm for her to take. And I read in a book written back in a book about one of them politeness books or whatever you called them, the charcuterie books. What are those? What are those?
Chivalry.
What is that thing? That class? Cotillion, but it's not cotillion. But it's like one of those politeness books. And
You mean the book that tells you to put the book on top of your head and walk around with it?
It kind of like it was about how men and women should act around
We're talking
each other.
about the books that said that the woman should make one of her husband's favorite drinks and put it in the freezer, and then make a second one and be waiting at the door when her husband walked in, and not to talk to her husband until he was finished with his drink.
Yeah, actually, it was
mean that book?
It was. Well, I don't know if it was that specific book, but it was like that. According to this book, that was probably written in the 50s or something. As a man, you're not supposed to offer your arm to a woman to take because it makes her look cheap.
Yes.
That's what it is.
It's one of them books.
It's one of them books. And the Geordi did that to Pulaski, but it's the future, so they know better than that. But we're still in the middle of that transition today.
If I were the computer, I would have, instead of combining two canonical Sherlock Holmes stories, I would have used perhaps a plot from one of the non-canonical stories, which we get the impression that Data is not familiar with, right? So,
are you talking about like the movies Young Sherlock and things like that?
well, exactly. Like Arthur Conan Doyle wrote these 60 stories, and that's it. But a number of people have done
Should take
Sherlock
some
Holmes
fanfic.
stories that aren't based off of the original ones. Yeah, and there's a ton of fanfic that they could have used. Or perhaps why not do this entire episode except with Columbo as the premise instead? And then Data's going around, like one more thing. But he doesn't have a sidekick.
But
in that
Geordi,
ep- Geordi could play the local police officer who doesn't know what he's doing and gets aggravated because he thinks Columbo's stupid, but then it turns out he's right.
What was with Geordi at the beginning? Geordi was getting so into his role that he actually sat down and started writing in a hollow book.
Yeah.
Like, how is that fun? How is that? You're not going to preserve that and take you home with it. It's just going to disappear. But what kind
He's
of...
a nerd.
I guess in the future, writing with those kinds of instruments would probably be fun for them.
Yeah, totally. It's
You know? Because he was talking
It's like writing with like one of those writing quills.
Yeah, and he was talking about, wind in the sails, that's how you should navigate.
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
but Geordi, you're used to space dust moving the Enterprise.
What do you think
around
about
and-
the whole HMS Victory model? I thought I like the idea of the models. I think that's cute.
Oh yeah, it was the Victory. Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
Geordi said that he was when he was an ensign, he served with the person who's currently
Captain
the captain of
Zimbata.
Yes, Captain Zimbata of the the u.s.s.
The
Victory.
HMS
I was about to
Pinafore.
say. Isn't the HMS Victory isn't that like a museum ship now or something?
It
That's still
is,
around,
yeah.
right? I think-
Yeah, it's
I don't know.
in Portsmouth.
Do you remember what era ship was that, Jesse? Was that like 1700s?
It
or
was
something?
built in 1759.
Jesus, It's still
How the
around.
fuck did you know
It's
that?
like the Constitution.
I looked it up.
Oh, word.
Did you? You saw it though. You were in.
I saw it from a distance because I was over in the city where it is, which it's in Portsmouth, and I took a ferry to the Isle of Wight from Portsmouth, and I saw it when I was cruising around on the ferry.
HMS Victory.
I can't remember the last time I was on a ferry.
Saw it from a distance. I didn't see it.
I mean, ferries are fun.
I do. Yeah, I
Ferries
enjoy
are fun.
So
it was just kind of funny because we don't see these gifts very often. This concept of like, oh, I'm going to make a hugely elaborate gift for somebody. I thought it was cute. It just kind of, it's a little out of nowhere because you're like, man, Geordi, like, did this guy like save your life or something? Like,
what are you talking about?
about Geordi made a fucking model
oh,
ship,
yeah, right,
like a
right.
massive, intricate, handmade
Yeah.
model sailing ship, which is hard to do. I mean, that
and
must
that
have
thing was
taken
big. Yeah,
fucking months. And
It was
Geordi,
really big,
Geordi's the chief of engineering. He's a busy motherfucker.
yeah.
And he's making that for
Yeah,
an
I don't
old
think he is.
friend of his.
And it was so big that it was kind of like one of those inconvenient gifts where you just get it and you're like,
Yeah.
thanks.
I guess
What do
we'll put this in like the cafeteria.
Yeah, it's like, what are you gonna do with that big thing?
Geordi's got like the buffer time. He's like, well,
The
yeah,
buffer
it's
time.
going to take
Wait,
like this long.
Are they
and
going to
then-
store? I mean, they're going to store it in the transporter buffer. That's
No,
where you put. That's where you put your old shit that
No,
you don't know
I'm
where to
saying-
put. You like leave
Well,
in
that
the
is a good
transporter
idea.
buffer.
Jesse's referring to the lower decks buffer time.
Where he's not really that busy.
where you always
the buffer time.
build in,
acting
you
busy.
got to
Right.
build in the extra time in your,
acts
work
So
estimates.
Geordi doesn't drink on his buffer time. He does models.
The victory was always just around the corner in engineering, like, and he would just sneak over there and like be like, okay.
Yeah, he was all
One
into
more
it. It
piece on
was,
this.
it was more a gift for himself than it was for Captain Zimbata.
There were a couple other things I wanted to mention about the whole creating the suitable opponent thing. It kind of mirrors what Arthur Conan Doyle had to do, because Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote the Sherlock Holmes stories, after a while he just grew aggravated with the character. He didn't even really like the character. By all accounts, Conan Doyle wrote the character almost as a parody. I think of an old professor he had in like medical school or something like that. But this idea of somebody who is comically obsessed with logic and deduction and all that, and has all these fucking problems. He's drug addicted, doesn't care if terrible things are happening to people if the mystery's not good enough. So he got bored of this character and he wanted to kill him off. And the funny thing is since he wanted to kill him off, he's still a good writer. So he was like, well, I've got to invent a really good character who would be plausibly capable of defeating Sherlock Holmes. And that's when he created the character of Moriarty. So that was in The Final Problem. And Sherlock Holmes supposedly dies when he and Moriarty go over the Reichenbach Falls, right?
Wow.
Here's the problem. Sherlock Holmes was such a popular character that all the public became enraged at this. And after a while, he had to come back and
That became his thing.
And he had to start up the Sherlock Holmes because he was doing these other stories that were also popular and people liked, but he first brought Sherlock Holmes back in The Hound of the Baskervilles, but that was kind of like a prequel story. Not a prequel, but it was a pre-death story, right? So he was just like, oh, I'm just going to tell another story from when Sherlock Holmes was alive. And then the public was like, no, that's not fucking good enough. And then so he did the Adventure of the Empty House, which is where Sherlock Holmes, it turns out he faked his death. And then there's a great cool mystery around it. And then Sherlock Holmes is alive again after that.
You know a lot about Sherlock Holmes.
I used to be like super into Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So,
I didn't know that about him.
You can read all the stories are in the public domain. You can just read them on the web. Or
Same with
Yeah.
William Shakespeare, the work of William Shakespeare.
Well, yes.
A lot of stuff.
Sherlock.
Do you want to listen to some? They probably have some audiobooks of William Shakespeare. I'm sure they have a bunch.
What do you think?
I mean, it seems like they would. It seems like if
I think
anything
there
was
might
going to
be a
be,
recording of somebody speaking that.
well, it seems like if anything was going to be, it would be like Shakespeare, right? But they should make a video book. They should make a video book of Shakespeare because you could see it then.
Are you talking about
But
like
not
a movie?
but not while you're
Talking about a movie.
Hey, you ever heard of this fella named Kenneth Branagh? He might have a thing or two to say about
Yeah,
Shakespeare
this
movies.
video.
Actually,
book you're
his Shakespeare
talking about.
movies are great.
So speaking of, you were talking about cocaine.
No, I was not.
You were talking about there was some kind of thing. So when they went into that room, when they first went into Data or Sherlock Holmes's room, and they saw all those things, they saw that the emerald tie pin.
Yes.
They had a copy of Whitaker's almanac.
Almanac.
They had a snuff box.
Yep.
Which when I think of a snuff box, I think of that show Snuff Box, and then I think of
Yes,
killing
with Matt Berry.
and I think of killing people because it wasn't that kind of part of the deal in that show.
Well, they were executioners.
Yeah, right. But a snuff box is actually where you put your snuff that you, which I can't. Is snuff go up the nose or is it the mouth?
Yeah, nose.
Yeah,
the nose.
like beetle snuff.
Yeah. Okay. So
you know, the on Deep
Beetle.
Space Nine, you know, the Grand Nagus Zek was always snuffing. Wasn't that beetle snuff or Beetlejuice or something? Beetlejuice.
So
Beetle nuts.
he says snuff box and he says Wilhelm. He doesn't say Wilhelm. He says Wilhelm.
Wilhelm.
That's the
Um,
proper
there-
pronunciation.
It is. It is. There's some kind of stuffed fowl.
Hi, my name is
There's some
Wilhelm.
kind of
How are you
stuffed
today?
fowl on the mantle. There's no cocaine, but there's some kind of it's
It should be
either
it wasn't a mix of cocaine and morphine.
well
That's
there
what
was,
he was into.
well I did see some kind of
Isn't that like a speedball?
I saw-
yeah, he was into speedball.
I saw some kind of glass thing and I couldn't tell if it was a pestle and mortar or a crack pipe.
You mean
But-
a mortar and pestle?
I don't think they had crack back then.
Huh? Well, you can make crack. You're gonna correct me on like you mean the same thing and the same thing except the other way around?
Well,
I was just employing the more colloquial phrasing. There's nothing wrong.
But there was
with
no
the way you said
reason.
it.
There was no reason for that, though.
Just clarifying for our
You mean,
audience
in
who
case
may
they
be
didn't
more
know,
comfortable with the more traditional.
It's the mortar and pestle. You mean I was saying the pestle mortar? You mean the mortar and pestle? The same thing and the same thing,
pestle. I
except
believe it's
switch
a
around.
pestle.
Oh, and
Mortar
they're
and
not going to know
pestle.
what you're talking about unless I point out that you didn't pronounce the T when you
Just
should
want to make our
have.
audience comfortable.
You mean the pestle and mortar? The pestle and mortar. I have no idea what you're talking. Oh, you mean the mortar and pestle?
when you said it that way, I wondered if we were going to get some mileage out of that. and then, and I thought maybe we would
leave it to old predictable Dan.
In fact, we would.
Patrick's predictable.
Or
that
I was
way,
going to
too.
say, where's it old predictable Patrick?
So there was a crack. So I don't think it was a crack pipe. I think it was a pestle and mortar. There was some kind of bottles of shit, and there was some kind of other nondescript shit, and then there was that 55 shilling violin. And that makes me think, how much is a shilling?
Not that much.
Shilling to USD, a Kenyan shilling. A Kenyan
Shilling's
shilling,
like a nickel.
Look at 19th century London, English, pounds, shillings, halfpennies, tuppence,
Shilling's like a nickel.
2 pence.
How much was a shilling worth in the 1800s, according to Kuara? For most of the
what?
1800s, a shilling was approximately a day's
Quora.com.
wage. By comparison, today's minimum wage is nearly, I don't know. It's talking about like a shilling was a day's wage, but now it's 70 pound is a day's wage. And how much? So a shilling was like a nickel. So it was like $1. He got a thing for like $2 or $3. He got a violin.
I think it was
which back
probably more
then,
than that.
which now means like $50 or something.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
So he got, but it seemed like an okay violin, you know.
Yeah.
another-
Nowadays it's some kind of markup racket.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, how about this? We've been running our mouths too long. Let's take another
Speaking of
quick
mouths.
break, and then we'll wrap things up. Just a few more things to discuss, and we'll wrap it.
Just a few more.
Wrap it all up.
Here's just a few more things.
I don't
That's
know
the
what
number
you're doing.
one thing.
No, see, that's the thing is he knows he can't give the audience too much of the he's my number one dad thing. We know that's a very popular feature of this show, but you got to dole it out.
You got to do it when it feels natural.
The thing though is Dan does that when we're not recording. That comes out a lot, and so he tried to he accidentally started going into it and tried to veer off in a different direction.
Right.
That was the result. So
All I need is some cat.
yes, there we
Hey,
go.
Willie.
Good old Alf. You might develop some more material for that voice.
Hey, Willie. You got any cat?
Yes, I mean that's
Pretty much all he's got.
that's all he's got so far.
Willie. Melmac. There's a new one.
Melmac.
Melmac.
All right, we will be.
My name is Gordon. I can't do it. I'm not.
Gordon
I've
Shumway.
tried to move too fast.
I bet you a bunch of people don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Good.
That you have flown too close to the sun. But when we come back, we'll talk about what this slight variation on the ending, what the original ending was going to be. And what
that's
your thoughts,
titillating.
What
I
your
didn't
thoughts
know
are.
about
I didn't know about
this.
this. I didn't know about
I
this.
also
either.
did not
I
know
didn't
about
know
this
about
until
this either.
We're teasing the shit out of this, and we're awesome. If we had
Tease
mad
each other over
commercials,
the commercial
people
break.
would listen to all the commercials just so they could stay for our next segment.
I know.
They would.
They wouldn't switch the channel to a
They
different
wouldn't.
podcast.
No, they wouldn't change that dial.
All right, we'll be right back.
Yeah.
We're back. All right. So, closing up shop here on the
Jesse.
145th episode of the It's Got Star Trek podcast. Elementary Dear Data. So, a couple production notes on this that I thought were interesting. First of all, we've already described how the production value is really high on this. It's like really cool to see the 19th century foggy London streets and all that. And this was directed by Rob Bowman, who did
Rob Bowman.
Rob Bowman. He ended
The
up
one and
doing,
only.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, he did a lot of X-Files and other stuff. He did a fair amount of
Not
Star
Bob
Trek,
Roman.
but he talks about how he loved this episode and then also hated it in that he got to pick this script. He was so excited to do it. They gave him this incredible set, this city street. He said the way they built this up was just amazing. They got to do all this stuff. They really gave him all the things he asked for, except then he said, like, at the last minute, they they switched from originally he was supposed to have 8 days to film this episode, and they cut off a day. They wanted to save some money, so they only gave him 7 days. And he said it ended up being like the most miserable experience filming this, because he's like so excited about the story, so excited about the opportunities that were being given to Brent Spiner in particular, but also to the other characters to have fun and play around in these costumes and all that. But it was just murder to actually do it, because they had to squeeze it all in. In his opinion, they had to squeeze 8 days of filming into 7 days.
You say they squoze?
I was about to say that. Yeah.
Squoozed.
So they squoze in 8 days into 7.
So that was one thing that's kind of interesting, because when you watch the episode, it really seems like everyone's having a good time. It really seems fun. It seems like and the directing is real confident and solid, and the acting's great. But yeah, apparently it was a bit of a rough shoot, because they had to do all this stuff and just get it done. I think it had something to do with the sets were so big, and the rent per day of the sets, they were just like, no, we want to be able to get rid of the sets.
All that steam they had
quick.
going around everywhere.
Yeah.
And all those science jars in the background in Moriarty's. Was that a lab or a barn? What was that?
That was an old school lab.
Yeah. I don't think there was
for like a mad evil genius guy.
I mean, yeah, I guess they had to.
Not a mad genius.
I don't know. Jesse, do you know? Did they store a lot of livestock within London at this time? They probably wouldn't have had much barn.
Probably
stuff.
in certain parts of it.
Maybe in this type of part. So it could have been a barn that was turned into a lab, because it had a barnish feel.
A blab.
There's that part where the queen keeps all her horses.
Alarm.
Yeah.
A barn. So were you saying there was another ending?
There was another ending. The original script, and I'm curious what you all think about.
So they were gonna go with the original ending. They just ran out of time.
No, that's a separate issue.
Okay.
The one issue that I just found mildly interesting is that they just didn't give them enough time. So Rob Bowman actually said he drifted away from Star Trek after this, because he was frustrated that they were having these great ideas. But then the studio was like penny pinching.
Must have been serious. He must have been seriously pissed.
In the interview when you read it, he's
like a life-changing
He himself says, you can tell I was angry about that. Mm-hmm. And he said if it was a middling episode, he wouldn't have cared as much. He said it was because it was such an awesome episode, and he was so excited to do it.
That's like the ultimate fear of when one is creative, is that like, I have this awesome idea, I need to execute it just right. Because if I execute my awesome idea poorly, it might be okay, but it won't realize the level of it won't transcend. Like, it's like this idea is supposed to be transcendent, and something kept it from being that way. And that's a super fear.
And he thinks they did a good job in the end. He liked the final product, Rob Bowman, but was frustrated at the time at having to rush through things, right? They really had to rush through filming the scenes because they just didn't have enough time. The thing about the different ending, though, is that in the script, and this is a bit confusing to parse out. As originally written, the way the episode resolves is basically the same as it resolves here, in that Moriarty is convinced that he can't leave the holodeck, so that's tough luck on him. In the original ending, though, Picard has figured out that Moriarty can, in fact, leave the holodeck. At that moment, because they hadn't figured all this out yet, they were saying that Picard noticed that once Geordi, remember that piece of paper that Geordi takes out of the holodeck?
Yeah.
And we can talk about that briefly, about ever since I saw this the first time, how aggravating it was, where Geordi like does the whole reveal that Moriarty has drawn the Enterprise by flipping it over and showing Data, which means the entire time he was looking at it, it was upside down.
I didn't even notice.
It's every time I watch this episode, again, one of my favorite episodes, drives me fucking nuts, because Geordi is like, yeah, awesome. Data, well, what about this? And he flips over the thing, and then it's right side up.
He did it on purpose.
And then you're like, oh, yeah, exactly. He was just being dramatic about it?
Yeah.
Or with his visor, is he like cool with upside down images? It doesn't make a difference.
Maybe it doesn't matter.
I'm sure you could come up with a reason why it doesn't matter, but honestly, it's silly, right?
Right.
Totally.
Okay. So anyway, Picard knows that this paper came off of the holodeck, and in the original conception, that's the clue that Picard uses to know that, something Moriarty has done by taking the fail-safes off has made it so that holographic stuff can come off of the holodeck. Right? Now, we would explain that paper away in our headcanon very easily as saying, the holodeck is also a replicator and stuff. Picard says it in this episode. So having a piece of paper is no big deal, you know? But anyway, Picard, with that bit of information in the original ending, knows that Moriarty could in fact walk off and be alive because of some quirk in the system, and lies to him in order to get him to give control of the ship back. Because obviously the problem is even if Moriarty can come off of the holodeck, he's still in control of the ship at that point, and why would he relinquish it, right? He'd be like, no, I'm alive now, I'm going to take this ship wherever the fuck I want. So that was the original ending. And they ended up changing it during shooting because the argument was made, which I frankly agree with, is that it's sort of unnecessary for Picard to like lie to this dude. And like, why is Picard lying to the dude? It was just like a weird thing to introduce, that Picard was just going to be like, I'm going to lie to this fucking sentient creature, sapient creature. I don't know. It was a weird thing.
Well, there was a bunch of questions, and that is actually the way they went with it. It wasn't resolved in my mind, like, because as a result of this, what you were just talking about, how he says, like, you're just going to have to live like this, Moriarty. Moriarty's just like, okay, I'm just going to live like that. And Moriarty returns command of the ship to Captain Picard, which is believable, I guess. It's like, oh, he's giving up. But then they're like, okay, problem solved. But there's nothing indicating that Moriarty can't do it again if he wishes, to take over the thing again. So,
spoilers,
see him later on.
Which we say
happens in Ship in a Bottle in season 6.
Right. So, but I like the idea where they supposedly quote unquote kill him, but not really. They say they don't kill him. He disappears and is gone from existence. But like the character of Moriarty, he's waiting to come back another day. But yeah, so they didn't really. I guess so. You're saying the other ending they didn't do it not because of logistical purposes, but just more like, why would Picard be an asshole?
It seemed like Picard would be an asshole.
It would make him it would be out of character for Picard because it didn't solve any logistical issues. Because like I said, I don't know why he can't just steal it again if he wants to. Which well, you know.
And the other aspect, which I haven't heard other people mention, but I was thinking about it, is like, it's a problem if you've now created the idea that it is possible to create sapient holograms who can then just walk off the holodeck. You can make copies of the crew. You could do all sorts of things. Some of those might lead to interesting stories down the line. Most of the time, that's just going to be a problem. Well, I think that's sometimes you can create something that causes actual problem in your universe if something becomes possible.
Well, so here's some of I had a bunch of questions about that I left this episode with that they didn't resolve.
All right. Question number 1.
How did Moriarty call Arch? How was he able to do that? And actually, I want to make a side note on this one.
Because he was programmed to.
No, because
the computer gave him permission.
No. Okay, maybe, but there's a slight timeline thing that's going on that's a little weird. Geordi pulls up the Arch to tell the holodeck to make the program capable of defeating Data. But before Geordi says that,
Moriarty
sees the Arch. So that's the point that he notices something's up before he even. And then I guess at that point you're to assume that Geordi the computer imbues like the will to do something like that. If Geordi hadn't said that, you could already see in Moriarty's eyes that he was already the wheels were turning in his head before he was given sentience. So it kind of like didn't I don't know. And then I don't know. So it was kind of not.
I can argue that is a production mistake.
Yeah,
it was an editorial choice that they made, that they should have waited one beat to have Moriarty see the Arch.
Okay, that makes the most sense. So we wonder, how can he say? It's funny when he says Arch, because now we enter this like OK Google snafu scenario where it's like, it's
like when your parrot starts ordering stuff on your Google,
which is funny because that's kind of, what is it? Is that prescient? Is that the right word? Where it's like, that's a problem we have now, that prescient. And it wasn't even something that we would consider really back then too much, but that was the
when you're listening to a podcast or YouTube or something, and there's an ad for Google or Alexa.
Oh yeah.
And then it says the command, and then your Google starts asking questions.
Yeah, people, and wasn't there's been cases of not cases like it was criminal, but like I think there'd been like
it's criminal
trolling commercials, trolling. So
Question number 2.
So how did Moriarty realize that he could call Arch? So how was he? So how is he able to do it? How is the computer? Wait, first,
The computer gives him the ability. That's always been my conclusion.
is that the computer gives him the ability?
Because the whole point is that
no holds barred. Like
it's just like if it was just super smart Moriarty was trapped within the confines of the program, there would be no way to defeat Data because given those
because Data knows everything.
Data would be able to figure it out.
So it has to play unfair because that's the only way it can beat Data is by being unfair.
Yes.
Okay. So how does Moriarty realize that he could call Arch? And that was sort of the point I brought up of like what we'd kind of decided was the production mistake.
Yeah.
So I guess like
I think he realizes it my only critique of the production error is that they shouldn't have shown Moriarty paying attention to the Arch before Geordi entered the command.
Right. Yeah.
After he enters the command, it doesn't bother me at all that Moriarty can see the Arch, that he can figure it out very quickly, that he can call the Arch because he's seeing them call it and make it go away. That doesn't bother me at all.
Okay.
Question number 3.
So far what we're getting is we're just supposed to assume all this happens because that's what the computer has to do.
Yes.
Like, but even Geordi like brings up the thing. He's like, Data, how he's not supposed to be able to say Arch when Geordi gave the computer the command to like beat Data. The computer went above and beyond what Geordi.
It's because he gave an open-ended command.
Yeah,
Geordi wasn't being careful.
But it was so open-ended that even Geordi was like, he shouldn't be able to do that, and they didn't really answer it. But like you said, we're just supposed to assume the computer.
It's equivalent in storytelling world. It's equivalent to the genie, to the djinn stories,
right?
Where the wish, if you don't craft your wish properly, an open-ended wish can result in all sorts of shenanigans.
So I bring that up for question number 3.
Question number 7.
The question number 3 kind of goes along with the other one is how did Moriarty override the safety measures? Like how, okay, even if the computer gives him the power to say Arch, that at least makes sense, but how did Moriarty figure out how to override the safety measers?
I think he did.
How did he know the
computer
password?
overrided the computer's safety measures.
But how did he do that?
Because he did /help.
Slash help.
I honestly think that's basically he did a version of typing the command slash question mark slash help because he was just talking to the computer for a while because he's just calling the Arch and talking to the computer.
Well, at one point he's like, I can't remember the last command. I was like, remember? How would you know in the first place? But
because he's learning, but he can't remember all of the commands because he's still an 19th century motherfucker.
And it's a 19th century motherfucker. The computer's like the Oracle of Delphi or something. But so basically Moriarty is part of the cheating computer to defeat Data. We've accepted that it's computers given Moriarty like top security clearance at this point.
Yeah, and Moriarty is a misogynist because he keeps saying Mr. Computer. Yes, even though the computer is performing what appears to be a female voice.
Yes,
Mr. Computer.
I know. I noticed that too.
Yeah.
How did Moriarty draw the Enterprise? How did he know what I guess that goes back to he did.
Once he has the
help.
Arch, he can look at screens, he can look at schematics, and he's got that's no problem.
How was he able to create a shake the Enterprise lever?
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I guess he just told the computers like, "I'm gonna make me a lever that connects to the engine of this vessel."
And what was the purpose
to get the captain in there?
Did he just want to grab his attention? Like he wasn't trying to. He should have made it more complicated so he could fire phasers or something. You know? But,
I know.
But he didn't know about. Maybe he didn't understand the concept of a phaser.
Maybe he hadn't gotten that far into the hacking.
He's basically sitting there reading the TNG technical manual.
Right.
He's like, what is this cetacean ops?
It's a dense read.
How is Picard able to say merd on how do you say it? Merd on television when if you type merd in Google, it direct translation is shit.
Yeah, it's the same reason why they let people say scheisse.
Yeah. But that's fucked up. That's not one of the things.
Well, we do know that you are have a long-standing prohibition against curse words.
Yeah,
in your vocabulary.
I'm not cool with it.
I thought it was funny that he said like Bristol shape.
I love
some
that
kind of Royal Navy thing, but he's still supposed
Bristol
to be,
fashion.
He's still supposed to be like Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah, I know. Well, he's always that's because
he's still Patrick
They
Stewart.
quickly forgot that he's a Frenchman.
So the last couple questions are, how can Geordi possibly take any blame for this? That was the whole thing. Like, how can Geordi be expected to take any blame for this? Geordi accepted blame?
I disagree with that. I can totally see how Geordi as a character would feel bad and think that he was the proximate cause of this.
Yeah,
and you could argue that he was because he gave an open-ended
But it's a
command.
holodeck. It's a holodeck.
No, I understand.
And he should have known better.
He should have better fucking known better.
Look, Geordi did not like maliciously like misengineer something that caused a bunch of children to get decapitated. But I could see
Not
like
yet, anyway.
you could do something and be like, oh, you know what? I missed like a programming thing and it made Chief O'Brien break his shoulder in the turbo lift or something.
So that brings me to my next question.
He fell down at Jeffrey's too.
Like he didn't mean to do it, but he did something like a little bit inelegantly, and as a result, people potentially could have gotten hurt.
This is bringing me my next question, which is often an issue with Star Trek. It's a great plot device, which is, how is the holodeck bugged this badly, that it can do these kinds of things? That's what make all the best holodeck episodes, right? Which they all are.
Yeah.
Somehow the holodeck is bugged, and of course then everyone's asked, and this is not a new question, is how they still allow these things that they keep getting.
I think that people have all sorts. First of all, point number one, you got to rely on headcanon in this case, because obviously it's because of TV and drama and stuff. So you got to develop your own headcanon as to why this keeps happening.
That headcanon is always such a. I don't like.
No, but
I don't like
headcanon. But you can't not like it because it's just everyone has it. Whenever you're watching,
if you have to come up with too much headcanon, though, it's kind of like a.
Yeah. If it's too much, yeah. But the thing is no matter what, you're taking certain things for granted and you're assuming how certain things happen. My own headcanon for why the holodecks are consistently dangerous places is probably some quirk of it is like all the sexual stuff that people want to do, all the weird fucked up shit that people want to do. Like there's some balance between safeguards being really, really good and people getting to do whatever weird fucked up shit they actually want to use the holodeck for. And the balance is leaning in the direction of, you got to let them get a little freaky.
And if you have security codes like Geordi, you should know that, like, since you're capable of disabling the mortality failsafe, you're mixing it all together, and something you could say, you have the power to do whatever you want. And so
I want them to do more episodes where they try to do something on the holodeck, some clever creative plan using the holodeck to save the ship, but then the holodeck safeguards just don't let them accomplish that plan.
Yeah, right.
And they're all like, God damn
exactly.
it.
Right. That's
they're like, if we just develop this prism thing and it'll create a laser and it'll solve the Nope, the holodeck won't let you do that.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions?
Well, the last question was kind of the first question, which was just once again, how did Moriarty return command of the ship to the captain? But there's nothing indicating that he won't do it again in the future when he wishes. I mean, it's just like, and like I said, they just hand wave that. He's like, okay, problem solved.
He comes back.
It's cool. Right.
And it's another really awesome episode, actually. Maybe not quite as charming as this one, but
He's real.
If you've enjoyed this episode and you don't mind skipping ahead, you can skip ahead to Ship in a Bottle, which is a sequel to this episode with the character of Moriarty.
Geordi says that shit about from here to Alpha Centauri. Alpha Centauri, come on. Get real, man.
By the way, Moriarty was played by Daniel Davis. He probably most famous. He was Niles the butler on The Nanny.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
But he actually he played the commander.
He kind of reminds me of not Gene Hackman, Gene Wilder a little bit.
He does, in fact. Yeah,
Willy Wonka.
Yeah, he does. In this
Factory.
episode, he looks Willy Wonka. But in Hunt for Red October, he plays the commanding officer of the u.s.s. Enterprise aircraft carrier. It's a very, very brief role, but he's in there. He's a Southern gentleman. He's from Arkansas, so he does this really great British accent. But his normal accent, if you listen to him in interviews, he's got a strong Southern accent.
Probably in Hunt for Red October, if he has any.
Yeah,
like Larry the Cable Guy's from like Minnesota or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nebraska, I believe.
I feel like we've already made references to it, but we can't end this episode without talking about.
Can't end it.
We're talking about
Can't end it.
Oh no!
Moriarty filling Pulaski full of crumpets. Like what? Like that was a weird scene. Like when Picard walks in, she all gets up and is all stumbly, and he's
I'm full of crumpets.
He cramped me full of crumpets. She's weak on her feet. did she hook up with Moriarty? And if so, did she know at that point that he was actually trying to kill her? I think at some point she did know that. Or did she ever know that he was trying to kill her?
Pulaski's a bit of a rascal, I guess.
Yeah, I think she's just having a good time.
But she knew,
making the best of a difficult situation.
Maybe she was trying to get him into a weak spot.
Maybe she needed a crumpet.
Maybe she's just hungry.
And as if we didn't get it enough, at the end he goes like, "But I'll still fill you full of crumpets." At the end, he says
I know,
that
it
to
was
her. It's
weirdly
just like,
sexual.
Jesus Christ! It's like we got it the first time.
Do you put jam on a crumpet?
Oh man, see,
I would, yeah. Do you put the clotted cream first?
Or
I mean the
butter?
jam first.
That's a scone. I
So
think.
she,
scone.
look,
Well, yeah, you could- yeah,
it's
probably a
okay.
scone.
I'm just
I would
thinking.
put jam and butter.
I
on
just
a
don't think it was
crumpet.
the. I mean, what do I know?
I don't believe I've ever
It
had a
seems like a
crumpet.
stressful scenario when this hologram is trying to kill you, and you end up like. But wait, even all that aside,
Oh my God,
implied
this
all
guy.
aside, the way she stood up and was all stumbling, and she's like, "Oh," like it was really.
They were drinking some
it was-
port as well. I'm sure they were drinking a nice dry port.
I think they implied so much that it makes it creepier in my head. I'm imagining what they could have possibly doing.
Could be you're just a creepy guy.
No, because it's so unclear what happened. You know, they don't.
What happened?
And it's just so like out of left field. It's like, what did they do? Why is it so creepy? Why is she? They drank and had sex?
What
Did
were
they?
they
Or was
doing?
she just literally kind of like? Was she tired? Like, what was happening?
Well, I
when
was
you
gonna,
drink stuff on the holodeck, is it actually
Does
real things,
synthahol-
or is it just
well,
is
does
it just
synthahol-
totally
It's
is it
probably
is it
synthahol.
What does
is it
synthahol-
holographic food? Is
It's
it
like
not even
they have like
synthahol?
synthahol and they have syntha heroin and they have syntha cocaine.
but does
But
synthahol actually get you drunk?
But do you get it on the holodeck?
That's
Or
a
do you
whole.
just-
That's
do
a
you
wole
just get a-
fucking. That's talking about
It's just
headcanon.
hologram food.
That whole synthahol
Hologram
thing
food.
about like, oh, you get drunk,
Well-
but not with the bad effects or whatever.
Well, holodecks are, while they are like the transporter, like
Or
they're
the replicator.
Well, they said in the they're like the transporter, like I was mentioning, but they're also like the replicator.
Yeah.
So yeah, essentially they could just replicate. That's what they're doing. But then the replicators don't have to be in the hologram world, but the holodeck people are in the hologram world. So if you had food, in the holodeck, would you be able to take that food out of the holodeck? And if
But
not,
would you actually
You
be
mean
able
as
to eat
poop?
it?
like
I'm sure the holodeck food is replicated food, so you can eat it and enjoy it and take the poop home with
So
you.
like
You take
in
the poop.
Voyager,
The poop doesn't like stay
where they
back
have that
when you go leave.
bar, like they can actually they're actually having drinks at that bar. They're not just pretending to have drinks.
Yeah, in Fairhaven.
So
Yeah,
Yeah.
Or that like French bar that the first like holodeck place in Voyager that Tom Paris comes up with.
yeah,
Where
Tom
it's all
Harris is
chocolate.
always coming up with holodeck stuff.
so the poop doesn't come out of you when you leave the holodeck.
Well, the last thing I wanted to
I
mention
don't think
is
so.
they don't play it this way so much in the episode, so that I might be reading more into it than is really there. But I've always gotten the impression that yes, the computer has given Moriarty a certain level of capability and intelligence in order to defeat Data, and he's learning a lot through the computer and all that. But I think that the presence of Pulaski actually helps accelerate his intelligence and maybe takes it even beyond what I mean, the computer
Right.
didn't have any intentions, but because Pulaski with her fiery personality,
and she was offering the challenging questions of these are the things you have to think about
Yes.
when you're talking about humanity and an android. So
yeah,
it
but
forces you to
I'm talking
focus on-
specifically about her interactions with Moriarty is that she is presenting herself. She's trying to play the role, but she can't help herself. So she is a clue to Moriarty that something's going on here. Just talking to Pulaski and the way she's acting and the way she holds herself is something that I think he has not encountered in this fictional Victorian England, right? So I would argue that part of his evolution of a character is in those interactions with Pulaski, that she is not merely the damsel in distress, and she's not even in that much distress at any point, apparently, even though she's been kidnapped, because she's just a strong character. She's all irascible and shit, right? Anyway, I just thought worth noting that observation. Any other odds and ends? Any other little bits and pieces before we shut things down for another week on the It's Got Star
Something
Trek
about the
podcast?
inspector reminded me of Ray Purchase.
Yes, he did. He did come off as a little Ray Purchase from Toast of London and or Toast of Tinseltown.
There was a part where Geordi really buried the lead when they were trying to come up with ways to like shut down the holodeck.
Lead spelled Lede.
See, now that it's like you were correcting me for something that I didn't even get wrong.
No, you didn't get anything wrong. and
I
there
know,
was
but
no
it's like you corrected me somehow. But
I was
didn't even
adding flavor.
I mean, I know how it was spelled, but I always thought you were.
I know you
It's
know.
almost like
Wait, what are
It's
you
almost
saying?
like you were implying that I said it wrong, and later someone's going to be like, Dan didn't even know how to spell lead. And I was like, I didn't
I
even
don't
try to
think
spell
anyone
lead.
will come across
Patrick just
someone-
spelled it for me.
Yes, I'm just just tossing that out there.
Toss
You
me
know,
so.
it's no, okay. We can educate people on the different spellings of lead. Let's not educate them on the term tossing salad.
No.
If you don't know the term, you can look it up
That's not our job here.
But one of the
with jelly or without.
One of the things was they were like, "Can you shut down the generators, the generation, the hologram?" Yeah, Riker says something about shutting down the hologram generations themselves.
What was that whole thing that Geordi was talking about, like doing some kind of beam that would wipe
Right.
out all the holograms? And they were like, what about the doctor?
That's
it's like,
what
well,
I'm
well,
saying.
it tears into human flesh.
That's what I'm saying. Exactly. He
forgot
very
It's like,
about
why
that.
did
Yeah,
you even
that's great.
say that?
why
asshole?
why
Because he
did
says it so calmly. He's like, "Oh, but it also rips apart human
But
flesh."
yeah, but he didn't. But the thing is, he didn't even bring it up. Picard had to ask about that,
Exactly,
right? He
yeah.
had to fucking ask. So exactly, why did he bring it up?
It's like,
and
was he
Geordi
doing
is
a
not
bit?
Why
good
did-
with
why-
human social interaction.
Right, but he had to wait for Picard to ask before he was like, "Oh yeah, it will kill her."
Oh yeah.
Isn't he new? He's sort of new to being the chief engineer.
Yeah, in season-
maybe
season
Picard's
one, he
having
was
some
not.
second thoughts now. Like,
Yeah.
maybe he shouldn't have been. He's only a lieutenant.
I was wondering what the point of that whole extra death when they're saying the computer has a separate crime going. I understand that, like that dude who got out of jail and drank gin and got strangled. I understand, like, it showed us into the character of how Data was getting into it, and Geordi and Holmes and Sherlock and all those things. I understand plot wise. It showed us some flavor, but like, what was the in-story reason, like, as to why
to distract them? Now the question
just
is
to distract
how
them.
did Moriarty affect that within the computer? I don't know. Maybe the computer itself did it because the computer controls the whole plot as well as creating the characters. But yeah,
Just a
functionally in the
distraction.
story, it was meant
Computer.
to draw Holmes and Watson away from Dr. Pulaski so that she could be kidnapped
and
by unnamed brutes that we don't know who they are, because it wasn't Moriarty who captured Dr. Pulaski. It was some sort of hoodlums of some sort.
A goon
And-
squad.
And then lastly, I think it was that interlude with Riker and Worf, or Riker and Worf are being like, "Whoa, that's weird."
Like
What's
that famous
going on?
Star Trek episode, TNG episode, the interlude.
No, you're focusing on
The
the, wrong.
interlude.
You're not,
The interlude.
Yeah, I know.
You know?
Yeah, not the inner.
Internude.
As opposed to the inner might, it's
inner
the
might.
the
It's
inner-
the internude.
Like lewds.
Yeah,
You know? Like in
right,
the 70s,
lewds.
people did lewds.
Everyone had lewds.
Yeah.
From playing, what was that? Drug war on the TI-82 calculator. What was it called? Whatever. They were talking about lewds in that
All right,
game.
can we give our social media stuff?
No, but
Please.
you interrupted me, and I'm actually making the point where Riker and Worf are like, when they cut away, when that moment of create
with the power spike thing?
Yeah, when the singularity occurs, or whatever you want to call
yeah.
it. It was that weird little cutaway to them being, what's going on? This weird. There was something really awkward about that transition that was kind of hilarious.
Well, it's because we had been nestled so comfortably into the 19th century environment, and then we're ripped out of it.
Right.
And then
exactly.
and then Worf is all like, "Oh, there's a power spike. Oh, it went away. Don't fucking who
Who
cares?"
cares a shit?
Riker is the only guy that doesn't get a costume. He
Yeah.
stays in his uniform the whole
And,
time.
and that's because if Riker was wearing the costume, all of our genitals would have been ruined.
Yeah.
It's interesting
Number
that,
one something.
that
It
Picard
just would have
only
exploded.
came in at like the last half of the episode, the last third
Yeah.
of the episode, but he was mostly absent from the
And there
beginning.
was no Wesley.
Yeah,
Well,
no
that's-
Wesley. in
that's
this
not
episode.
unusual.
There was no.
When did Wesley get introduced?
There was no guy.
Oh no, Wesley was in fucking Encounter at Farpoint, motherfucker.
really?
You know that.
Come on.
Was that when he sat in the captain's chair and
He was all like, he was on the bridge.
he was on the bridge and he all sat down and Picard was like, well, I never.
All right.
I know. Anyways, I thought it was the episode was whimsical, lighthearted fun, and serious life and death scenario all mashed into one.
Yes.
That's
And
what I
that
thought.
Splendid.
that rhymed in the end. Okay, so that was Elementary Dear Data.
It rhymed?
Fantastic episode.
Oh yes,
It
did.
was.
Next week we don't know. We'll figure it out. check our social media feeds. You'll find out what we're talking about. But the week after that, we're back to
Star Trek.
covering new episodes because Lower Decks comes back on August 25th. A couple weeks
Give
from
him
now.
a lower decker.
So we're getting super excited about that. So who knows? Maybe next week we'll
When
do
you go to a party, don't give someone a lower decker.
Yeah, see, that's a variation on Upper Decker, which is a crass sort of trolley prank you can pull.
That's
on
where your
somebody.
digested holodeck food goes when you leave the holodeck. Is in the. Anyways.
All right, so we're gonna get back to Lower Decks.
The Upper Deck.
New Lower Decks coming up in a couple of weeks. Next week, who knows? Maybe animated series, something. We'll figure it out. To find out what we're gonna be talking about next week, keep an eye on our social media feeds, which you can locate
Or don't. We don't give a
at
fuck.
It's Got Star Trek on Twitter and Instagram.
Maybe we
and
won't tell you.
Facebook.
Maybe it's
And
a big
if you're into it, you can listen to the podcast on YouTube.
Maybe we're going to tell you one thing and
And
talk
you
about something else.
Go to the website at www.itsgotstartrek.com where you can sort by series if you want to just listen to particular episodes that come from a whatever. You'll
Maybe,
figure it out. Just go to the website. Check
Provide
it
the proper queries to sort through the series.
out. Yeah, like Dan said.
I don't think you get to query.
Yeah. But that will do it for us this week. And until next week, we hope you all have just the loveliest of times.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. I'm just trying to be nice to these people.
These people.
Try to make the best of things, everybody.
All right.
Try to make the best.
We will talk to you approximately this time next week. Bye-bye.
Using waveguides, I could split a particle beam out of the matter-antimatter chamber and run it down through existing conduit into the holodeck. If accelerated to sufficient velocity, that would quite literally wash away all present holographic constructs. The London buildings, the streets, the people, all gone, including Moriarty.
Dr. Pulaski.
Well, a particle beam will tear apart human flesh as well.